The reunion between Clara and her father isn't the sweet one she'd hoped for, and she's realized she's made a huge mistake. Now she's an innocent in a very rough and tumble place, and she has no idea why her father's called her there. It certainly doesn't seem because he's interested in her as a daughter.
Chapter 3. Christian Rossi watched the interaction between Captain Guilford and the young woman in a matronly wool dress. She was pretty enough, but did little with it. Her dark hair was tied back in a demure braid hanging down her back. But the really interesting part was that she was brought in front of the mighty Guilford, which meant she was more than just some hostage, or lifted off a passing ship. Guilford had taken an interest in her, then dismissed her. Christian watched Guilford, noting anything the man was interested in, because Guilford had power in these parts, able to make things difficult for a young captain like himself. The entire community here depended on the structure Guilford had in place. He owned most of Tortuga Bay and paid for the goods they brought here. Lifting cargo off passing ships was all well and good, but it was useless if they couldn't sell it, and that was where Guilford came in. He was a legend around here, the #1 target of the Royal Navy, and he had effectively taken control of the Caribbean. Rumor had it that he wasn't well. Christian had arrived in the Caribbean 5 years earlier, having worked himself up the ranks through sheer skill and ambition. He'd taken his own ship and commanded a crew for less than a year, but he wanted to be the most fearsome pirate sailing these seas, taking the lion's share of the profit. He was young for taking command, but when it'd come down to it, few thought it worth standing in his way. But chasing down ships would only be so profitable as Guilford always took a severe cut, and there was little they could do about it, because they needed him. Christian had reached a ceiling in his advancement, and needed to find some way to break past it. There had been those talking of setting up an alternative to Tortuga Bay, but old Guilford was ruthless with anyone who tried to eat into his empire, and he had the power to make any one of these men do anything he wanted. Christian watched as the old man with steely gaze surveyed the tavern from above, standing with his legs apart and his hands on the balustrade, assured in his power. "Listen up, you curs," Guilford called out, and silence settled over the tavern. The man only spoke when it was important, and every single head in the tavern turned their attention up to the man whose voice boomed across the room. "I'm dying, and there's no bones about it. I need a worthy heir for this town." Christian paused, both shocked and intrigued. This was a significant development, heralding change, potentially war if things went wrong. Whoever this heir was, he would have a fight on his hands, as every pirate in this room wanted a piece of Guilford's empire. What everyone knew was that Guilford had no sons, hence no heirs, which would make the succession interesting, if not all-out war. Tortuga Bay was for the taking, and if anyone deserved to be Guilford's heir, it was himself, Christian thought, as he'd followed in Guilford's fearsome footsteps, making a reputation for himself through intelligence and viciousness. Few here deserved to be the man's heir, to inherit this town and the lucrative backbone of the piracy business. But fairness in succession was not how the world worked. England was rife with it, power being handed to some twit heir, undeserving and incompetent. Who knew where England would be if the power who deserved it rose to the top, ran the country and its business? Some would say the pirates controlled the Caribbean due to the incompetence of the Royal Navy officers being chosen on their family ties, leaving the smart men out of the decision-making. All the better for them. They were just capitalizing on the gentry's stupidity. "My heir requires strength, determination, and a willingness to do what's required. Hence I have devised a series of tests, open to the captains present. And the winner shall take control of this town and all its buildings, my ships, and my contract." The room exploded with noise as people reacted to this news. Christian's eyes roamed the tavern, noting the captains present, considering their skill in comparison to his, breaking out in a sly smile when he realized that there wasn't a man in this room he couldn't take, he wouldn't take. "Each event The number of contenders will be halved until there is one left standing. These trials will be grueling and they will test skill, hunger, and ruthlessness. I wouldn't advise you embark on these tests lightly. They will be dangerous, and that includes threats from the other contenders. Guilford's voice lowered and a smile spread across his face. I would strongly advise you watch your back and make sure your crew is loyal. A murmur of shock snaked through the room as people consider the implications of this contest, plus the fact that the reign of the king they'd been living and serving under was coming to an end. My daughter here, Guilford said, pointing at the plainly dressed young woman, who is my only known child, will have her chance. But this town will go to the strongest. I wish her luck. Christian's gaze switched to the girl, whose mouth had fallen open. She was by far no captain, and he'd never seen or heard of her. He suspected she barely knew one end of a ship from the other. He couldn't see her posing a threat at all, expecting her to withdraw before the contest even began. Christian laughed. This was the best day he'd had in a long time. He'd been searching for a way to advance his ambition, and today it had been handed to him. Sitting back, Christian poured himself a rum and watched as the girl was urged out the back by Tuber. Guilford had a daughter. He'd kept her well hidden, not that he could imagine Guilford being overcome by paternal feelings. Guilford didn't do feelings. Cool logic and ruthlessness was his stock in trade. Christian wondered where he'd dug this girl up from. There would be a lot of people interested in her as leverage over her father, perhaps overestimating his loyalty. He had, after all, not given his daughter his worldly goods, stacking her up in this competition with the most determined lot of ingrates ever sail these waters. She didn't stand a chance, and will probably be revealed for a fool within the starting minute. "What do you think, Rosie? Will you fight to own this town?" Captain Rosier asked. "This town is as good as mine," Christian replied with a beaming grin. "I'm not sure I'd bet against you. You have youth and arrogance on your side. A more determined man I'm not sure I've met. Will you sail against me? I'm not sure I want to expose my back to you." "I wouldn't hurt you, Rosier. Well, only if you got in my way. Only youth can have such impetuousness. Or those skilled enough to speak true." Captain Rosier laughed. "There's no fault in your confidence. Aye, and you have rare skill. I'll give you that. I will bet you claim this trophy, and we will all be at your mercy in the end. Take care to ensure this is the prize you want. Might be more trouble than it's worth." Christian smiled. He would love to be king. Power was always worth it. What else was there if not power? Now he just had to wait for this contest to start. In the meantime, he might as well drink, be merry, and enjoy the women. He hadn't had this good day in a while. Not as good as the day he would win, but it would do for now. Taking a slug of rum, he considered the captains ambitious enough to take on Guilford's challenge, and those too scared and timid to even try, conceding defeat before the challenge even started. His thoughts turned back to the girl, unable to imagine someone more out of place. While Guilford expected her to take part in this challenge, Christian didn't know. Guilford would no doubt give her one of his ships for the purpose, but would she even know how to sail? It didn't matter. She was nothing more than a flash in the pan, consumed as part of harder men's ambitions.